So hi, everyone. My name is John Busby. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Centerfield, and thank you for being at the B2B Technology Marketing Forum, brought to you by us, Centerfield, as well as two of our brands, business.com and Business News Daily. We hosted an event earlier this year across a number of B2B categories like HR software, industrial equipment, et cetera. And we had the strongest demand and questions for more content on marketing technology, products, services, and platforms. So that's why we're doing this, and thanks for being here. Let me kind of try to describe what I think is the problem that we're solving for in this 90-minute virtual summit today. And that's, I think, that we have too many priorities as a marketer. So consider these stats. I'll actually get to that. Actually, before I do that, let me say I screwed up the order of the slides here, but at Centerfield, one of our core values is giving back. And since March of 2020, we've donated more than $150,000 to charities focused on COVID relief and addressing systemic racism. And so we're also making donations on behalf of every speaker today at the charity of their choice as a thank you for their time. So thanks in advance to all the speakers. I'll ask you to talk about the charities you chose and why as we go get into the conference. But just to back up to what I was saying before, what I think the problem we're solving for today and the priority of this virtual summit is having too many things to think about as a marketer. So consider these stats, which you may have seen. Number one, 55% of B2B buyers search for information on social media. Number two, 34% of B2B buyers say their purchase decisions are driven by features. 27% price, 39% say brand, and then 80% of B2B buyers prefer to read a series of articles about a company over an advertisement. So what the heck do you do with all this information? I mean, when combined together, all this advice is basically like, do everything really awesome. And that's very hard for a marketer to do. It's almost like there's no priority there. Thank you for laughing. I was hoping.
And the problem is, John?
Yeah. So here's what I think that the real stat is, and that's B2B marketing, especially marketing of technology products and services, is effing hard. And so that's what we're here today to talk about. The goal of today's session is to have interesting conversations with successful business and marketing leaders about what's working for them, which hopefully all of you as attendees can take back to your organization. So we'll go through the agenda real quick, what we'll be covering today. First, what's working today at early stage companies. MH and Kirt and I will talk about that. Then we'll segue to a second session, which is what's working today for B2B marketers who are marketing at scale. I'll move from host to panelist, and my partner in crime, Danielle, will be interviewing Jeff, Greg, and me about marketing at scale. And then finally, we'll have a session which I'm really excited about called Rate My Landing Page. You're going to want to see this because our panelists are responsible for the raters, I should say, are responsible for nearly $100 million in media spend annually, and the customer experiences or landing pages that receive that traffic. So we're going to talk to the COO of We Crush Events about our website and open it up to the audience to have her website discussed or your website discussed. And so no pressure if you volunteer. Okay, so let's get right to it. I'm thrilled to discuss early stage marketing with Kirt and MH. And let me just get into it and start with Kirt. Kirt, would you introduce yourself and Syncfloor and let the audience know about the charity you chose?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Kirt Debique. I am the CEO and CTO of Syncfloor. We are a B2B platform connecting content makers of all types, businesses and creators of all types, to great commercial music to include in their productions and modern digital experiences. The charity that I chose was the ACLU. As a Black man and an immigrant, I come from Trinidad and Tobago. Immigration rights, voting rights, and general protection of our civil liberties are really near and dear to my heart. And the ACLU is, at the forefront of trying to make sure that we live in a more equitable world.
Thanks, Kurt, for that, and welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
MH, same question for you. Thanks for being here. Please introduce yourself and Stack Moxie and the charity you selected.
Perfect. Hi, guys. I'm MH Lyons. I'm the CEO here at Stack Moxie. At Stack Moxie, we are doing automated testing and observability for complex no-code tech stacks. I have the dubious distinction of not only having to market my product, but to sell to marketers and to sell to marketers who are perfectionists because they're in the marketing ops space. So it's expletive hard. For sure.
Okay, it needs two expletives.
I mean, I'd probably give it 12 if you give me 12. But yeah, we help make sure that leads are flowing across websites and into tech stacks and all the hard work we do to get those people actually make it to sales. And then my charity is Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and they just do incredible things for the kids of the Atlanta area. So I've been helping support them for almost 15 years now. So it's really cool that y'all, I mean, John, I've just never seen anything cooler than y'all donating to a charity I care about. So that's really neat.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I'm going to launch in with some questions, but for everyone who's attending, please feel free to pop in chat or Q&A. Thanks, Connor, for the shout out, by the way, via chat. And if you have questions, there's one question that came in, will slides be available for download? Yeah, there will. There won't be that many slides. We'll also host this on YouTube for later viewership. But we're going to talk about what's working today with early stage companies and MH and Kurt. I'd like you to think back to kind of the starting of the company, your companies. And did you have like a specific customer in mind when creating your company? And then how did you get your first customer, first handful of customers? And MH, I'll ask you that question first.
So I actually was my first customer. I had been helping roll this out, a marketing operations program at scale at one of a Fortune 10, and things kept breaking everywhere. And so we wound up building this product to help support our own activities. And it seemed super obvious to me that everyone would want this product. So I went out and I showed my XD diagram to a bunch of people, and they're like, oh yeah, that's totally going to be needed. And then we built it, and about a year and a half later, I got my first customer. Like it turns out we were just really early. The no code thing wasn't even a thing yet. And so we kept building, right? Because my background varies between marketing and product. And so I was like, well, if we just build more features, this will be obvious. And so we were very lucky that we were early and not just straight up wrong. And it turns out our first customers were people we didn't know. They always say the seat founder is going to be the best salesperson and that you'd have all these relationships. But it was people who had similar pain points who were our first customers. And we found them literally through great content on the internet and then long tail keywords.
Kurt, what's your story?
So I'll pick up the story sort of at post our sort of launch, which was in late summer last year, where we did sort of a soft launch, and we've been building this product particularly focused on traditional media, providing sort of commercial music licensing for traditional media, particularly advertising. And we sort of found some customers, through relationships and so on. In that way, the first sort of set of customers. But really, that launched us right into sort of the beginnings of the pandemic. And what we saw with our sort of initial customer set is that they ended up having a really hard time. Advertisers had to pull back because people were trying to figure out, well, what is the right message to give? Production companies were trying to figure out, how do we safely bring people together to actually do shoots? And so all of that sort of impacted, sort of the kind of business we were able to do on the music licensing front. But what happened at the same time was that a number of other areas, for example, digital fitness and wellness, social audio, etc. But I'll stick to fitness and wellness. Those were accelerated by the pandemic. People were going online to stay healthy, and that was an area where we also could provide great solutions. And it turned out that our first customer came in a kind of a weird way. They came to our site where we had really messaged this thing of how do we connect you to the best commercial music in the world from these labels and publishers that are our partners. And they essentially went through our forum and said, hey, I'm not an advertising agency or anything like that. I'm a fitness company, but I need music help. And that was sort of like where we went, huh, interesting. And when somebody cries out for help to you, you kind of want to go, maybe I don't know that thing as deeply as I should. Let's see what's going on there. And what we found was a lot of really great signal coming out of the fitness and wellness space. And that's a vertical that we're now very aggressively leaning into.
That's a really lucky in a way or story. And as marketers,
maybe it's a landing page story. Always have an out on your landing page for somebody to say, I'm not exactly this, but could you help me anyway?
Yeah, exactly. We have these target customers in mind, but there's this, our use case may be broader than who we initially thought our customers were. That's really interesting. MH, did you have any kind of aha moments like that?
Oh gosh, we really started to see in our target customer base this distinction. For us, it was their segmentation of their companies, and then more and more specialization in their job title. Like the longer someone's job title was, like the more likely they were going to be purchasing from us. And like, I mean, you could almost do it scientifically. Like if someone's going to be a really great marketing operations person, at some point, someone doesn't know what to do with them, but they know they don't want to lose them. So they promote them to senior manager or senior director. They're never just a director or a manager. And then they get extra specialization like for analytics and central operations. And so these super long job titles for us are the ones that the person has been out there searching for our product or has created some crazy hack with Zapier and Workato to make it work the way our product works. I mean, I'm really excited for the people just to come in and give us new uses for our product and start paying us for things we've never envisioned. Like, I think that sounds perfect.
Yeah, it's always a balance of knowing what you can invest in profitably and how big of a market is. MH, when you're talking about the evolution of the first year and a half to get a customer and then what's worked since then, you mentioned content and long tail keywords, which I think are two tactics that a lot of marketers who are here are pretty interested in. What type of experimentation did you do with those two tactics, and like what kind of learnings have you been able to have in turning those things to be your focus areas?
Yeah, I think we were talking about this earlier. When I hired my first marketers who weren't me, everyone's instinct is to find a high volume keyword and double down on it. And build landing pages and drive a bunch of people to it and use the SEM tactics to get that high volume keyword. And I think I told you guys, I got like 900 phone calls from people trying to migrate into the United States because our tool is very good at helping people migrate between marketing automation platforms. And so we paid thousands of dollars to just do nothing but field phone calls with people having a different intention of the keyword. And so I think, especially when you're a smaller scale startup, being very aware of that 100 customers who are looking exactly for your product are way better than 1,000 people who may or may not be looking for your product, and focusing on those very super specific, learn from me and don't spend all weekend on the phone with people trying to migrate to the US, and focus on keywords that couldn't be anything other than intent for your product.
I can say from our personal experience at Centerfield, it's a pretty similar story. I mean, we can go after a keyword or something like lead generation, or we can do something really specific to the problems that we solve or the verticals that we solve for, and we found a lot more success doing that. Kirt, you talked about inbound, folks finding you may not have envisioned. As you've been doing targeting or external targeting with with marketing? What are some things that have worked for you, or maybe things that haven't worked people can learn from?
Sure. So I'll kind of riff a bit on what MH was saying in terms of you really want to try to find those differentiators for you in terms of targeting and particularly for keywords, but across the board really is that doing tons of there's sort of your own research about your personas that you want to target. I think there's competitive research that you can do nowadays because in the end there are going to be people there that are going to be positioned competitively against you. And you want to try to take advantage of that and say, well, who are they targeting and what keywords are they targeting and what messages are they targeting and where are the gaps? And where are the gaps that speak specifically to my differentiation against them? And use that as a way to kind of guide how you're doing your targeting. And I think that can be a rich vein to mine in that context. For us also, there's a bit of going to basics that I think is sometimes missed. I know we missed it initially. And the story I tell is that when we brought on the firm that we work with on marketing, we kind of naively felt, okay, great. We're going to talk to this firm and we're going to come up with some assets and we're going to do some campaigns and we're going to get going. And they were like, so we're going to spend some time auditing what you've done and telling you all the places where your messaging and your flows are off. And you're going to work on that for a couple months. and then when it's really, really at a point where we all feel great about what happens when somebody gets there, then we're going to talk about the campaign. Because at that point, you've also worked a lot on how you express your personality in the site. And that should be a through line in the assets for your campaign. And we found that was a really big deal, is that, we're very, if you go to our site and you use our stuff, we're very bold, like, we're music. So we're like, okay, we're going to be very bold in terms of like the imagery we use and how we express that, etc. And it was really important for that to come through in our campaigns, right? So that there's a through line there as well. And so that's how I kind of approach it.
Yeah, I like the story of when we're paying for marketing and they actually come, like, are they seeing the right, they seeing the right things? So important. When we were doing our prep for this call, we were talking about some of like the so-called conventional wisdom in marketing and like what has applied to you and what hasn't applied to you. Do either of you want to sort of share any stories about where conventional wisdom isn't always right for an early stage company?
Well, I think what Kirt was talking about, the conventional wisdom that I think has been so wrong, in my perspective, plays nicely to that there is so much emotion that's driven from the words you choose or the imagery you choose. And in B2B, I think there's a very, people start to think of it as a business transaction and think that it's going to be not an emotional purchase or not an emotional relationship. And it turns out that all of the studies have shown that B2B decision making is far more emotional for people than their individual business lives, because it affects their livelihood. So for our product, where we're finding failures, and essentially someone could be calling themselves out with failures by purchasing our product, the very specific words you do use are critical. And that conventional wisdom of, let's make this feel like a transaction and it's a business transaction and they're just numbers and features, is 100% wrong. There needs to be that, emotional component to your messaging to make people feel comfortable in literally purchasing testing software.
That's a really interesting, I'd like to ask you a follow-up question about that, because it's true, as someone who, as a CMO, I'm buying marketing services, I'm buying technology services, and I'm not just buying the technology product. I'm going to be spending time with this product, so it's either going to make me happy or not. And then also with the people behind and building the product. When you were thinking about the emotion, were you also thinking about the people building it, the product itself? Like how does a B2B technology company sort of think about that part?
Again, coming from the marketing technology space, I think we've all been pretty let down by a lot of the products. So I think, the social proof, going back to social proof and giving people confidence that Our product is stable, our people are stable and are going to support it. We're not going to come after you and try and charge you extra for training after we sell you an expensive piece of software. That someone can really be supported, not just in finding their failures, but in communicating them and remediating them. I think those are, and it wasn't me, it was our CMO, Adam, did an amazing job of kind of going through some of this language and making sure that it fits that brand voice right and helps people have confidence. And even being a little more clinical can still evoke the right emotion. That, you know, fails happen. It's not a judgment. It's not a shameful thing, like being very conscious of that language.
That's great insight. Kirt, how do you respond to the conventional wisdom question?
Well, in two parts. One part is to say, MH is spot on about, sort of, making sure that you don't get into this like, oh, I'm doing B2B software, and so therefore it has to be, soulless in terms of how people interact with it. In fact, what we find is that, the diversity of archetype who's going to use your software across many businesses is such that you really want to think almost in a consumer-centric fashion in terms of how simple and rewarding it is to use your software to get a job done. So in our cases, we could have people who are producers and editors and production people using our software, or we could have fitness trainers using our software to do the same voyage of discovery for finding great music. And you want it all to feel like something that's a fun voyage of discovery, right? And that's all about emotion and bringing people in, sucking them in, right? And so it's really, really important to keep that at the forefront of your mind from your design all the way through your expression in campaigns and marketing and message and things like that. The other thing I would say is that, when we looked out there, I feel like it plays out in content marketing a lot. If you look sort of out there, the stuff that shows up for content marketing, particularly in the B2B space, it can be super, super dry, right? Here are the 5 steps for you to do XYZ thing, right? And when we looked at that, we said, well, there's no differentiation there, especially for a small company. How do you be signal instead of noise when people are looking for information about things that they care about and wanting to connect that to your brand? And that maybe the key thing is to actually think about how they connected to your brand and what they connect to your brand. So for us, we actually went in a very different direction about, sort of creating a series on the passion of connecting music with picture and talking to people who maybe in their normal day-to-day jobs don't get to talk about the passion part of their job as much as the sort of mechanics of their job. And so if we could get that to happen, then people get sucked into the interest of what we're talking about, the people we're talking about, and then they connect that to our brand and want to come try our brand. And so that's kind of how we looked at things.
It's cool how we're taking the science of marketing and marketing analytics and combining that with emotion, with people behind it, with content and those sorts of things. I want to shift gears a little bit because we've talked about some of the marketing tactics we've used today, we're using today. We've talked about like getting your companies off the ground. People may notice that you both have CEO titles, and I know that you do much more than act as the boss. But at what's been the appropriate point for you to be actually hiring folks who are marketers, and like what's that inflection point for an early stage company? MH, you mind taking a shot at that?
So for us, it was early. For our company, as I mentioned, we market to marketers who I think are most of the people watching this video, and I think most of them can acknowledge that they're probably pretty aggressive critics of marketing, incremental to being consumers of it. And so we had to have great marketing, and it's how our consumers want to buy. So we have 4 marketers on our team and 1 salesperson, and we have a freemium model so people can try the product. So for us, it was very early. In our first 10 hires, 2 of them were marketers, because it's critical to how our consumers want to purchase from us. And I think that's the deciding factor there. How do your customers want to purchase, and then support it with marketing content interactive demos, self-experiences, or sales, right? You're selling to salespeople. They're probably going to want to talk to a salesperson, and they like to purchase that way. No one likes to talk to salespeople, sorry, but you know what I mean.
In theory. Kirt, how about you? How have you decided on when to ramp up investment in marketing with people?
We did it closer to launch, as I talked about that kind of story when we brought the firm in to help us. I wish we had done it earlier. I think it's important as a founder to have a thesis and a point of view about who you are and who you're marketing to and how you want to express yourself as a brand. But the mechanics of making that real, we were really naive about what that really meant, and we learned a lot from the firm that we brought in. And so I wish we had done it earlier, because I think we would have sort of gotten certain things off the ground earlier if we had done so. But they, as a good firm would, I'll give them a shout out, Hawk Media. They really said, look, you're not going to do it until you do these things in the right way. And so we still got to learn the things we needed to learn.
All right, thanks, Kirt. Maybe if you're watching, you can see that Jeff Merkel has joined. Jeff's going to be in our next session, which starts in just 5 minutes. So that's a cue to me that I should be asking Kirt and MH my last couple of questions here. As an early stage company, you're doing something new, and so there's this, like, on the one hand, how do you differentiate yourself versus trying to say, I'm in this category that should be in your consideration set. You follow the question that I'm asking. How do you kind of balance differentiation versus fitting yourself in somewhere?
As someone who unfortunately has no option but to create a category, I would advise anyone from a startup marketing perspective to not have to be in that box if you don't have to. We literally closed our first deal this year where someone already had a budget line item for us, but creating that budget line item in a procurement standpoint, especially in enterprise B2B, is a lot more work than competing against something in an existing budget line item. So even if you can fit and then differentiate yourselves in a category, and even differentiating with model and pricing and go-to-market strategies, I think all of those things are great, but try and fit yourself in an existing budget line item at all costs, because it'll make your life easier.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We all want to be in the top right of the Gartner or Forrester magic bubble, whatever. But if you're doing something brand new, it's difficult. Congratulations, by the way, on having the pre-budget line item. That's really cool. I'm sure an awesome milestone. Kirt, how about you? Like in the box versus outside the box. How do you think about that as marketer?
Something that I feel like I find myself saying over and over again in a good way is that MH is, again, spot on. It's really difficult to come at something, even if you're, as a founder, you want to be doing something transformational for whatever industry or problem you're doing. But there's the other side of that where, as people sometimes say, that if there is no competition, then maybe there isn't a pain point, right? And so you really kind of want to do I'm in this box, I'm in the place where I too am solving your pain, but here's how I'm different and I'm doing it better. I think that that's a really important thing to try to find. And maybe in some ways that's a stealth way of getting people to realize that ultimately you're going to grow a new category. Because, a lot of what happens with, I think, startup businesses is that they go in and the successful ones find a way to position themselves into the current pain point and the current categorization. But as they sort of grow their remit, they create new categories. Right. And that's great, like, to be on a journey where that happens. But initially trying to be, sort of signal, making it easy, especially for B2B customers, to go, oh, that's what you're talking about. Now let me see if you're talking about it in a way that resonates for me in a better way than others do. That's a much easier path to.
Agreed. Thanks for that. Let me ask you both final words of either wisdom, advice, for folks who are in your shoes or want to build early stage companies or be more successful in early stage marketing. what you would advise?
I think finding a tribe. So Slack communities, people commenting on things you like, finding those people that you can toss ideas around with, and get new perspectives is just critical. So, there's lots of tactics and everyone is going to probably be unique. So finding those people where you can, and people who will just tell you you're wrong on occasion is so high value.
Would you at this stage advise a customer advisory board? Is that kind of what you're talking about, or something even more grassroots than that?
Oh gosh, no, I'm talking about like a CMO community, a Slack community.
I see what you mean.
Marketers and
I what you mean.
Yeah.
Not of your customers. You mean of folks who are going through the same things that you are.
Exactly. Yeah. Nailed it.
Thumbs up. Kirt?
I'll jump on the customer side of that, but I don't think it's about advisory boards per se. I think it's about digging in deep, especially with your early customers, and doing a lot of listening and reacting so that you can. It's amazing how much good customers can help shape your product and your message for other ones. I constantly find myself with one customer who's like, this is really important. And you think about it, and you're like, oh, okay, let's try to solve their pain point. And then 2 customers later, you're like, oh, hey, they need the exact same thing. Right. And so you're really trying to absorb as much learning as you can from those early customers to help you shape, again, the product, but also the message.
I changed my answer to his. His answer was great.
All right, I love that. Well, let me say on behalf of all the audience, thanks a ton, Kirt and MH, for your insights. Thanks for being here to talk about early stage growth.